Hey everyone, welcome to A Mess Nonetheless. I am Rachel.
And I'm Melissa, and we are sisters. And welcome back to A Mess Nonetheless. We're so excited you guys are here. Thanksgiving has come and gone. We hope it was fantastic for you guys. We are interested if you have already decorated at the beginning of November, after Thanksgiving, or if you wait until like somewhere into December. Rachel, what do you normally do?
It kind of depends on when Joey's off. I like to do it when he's home. So sometimes we do it before Thanksgiving, but usually it's after. I do not wait till well into December. I want it up like as soon as possible after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I have really seen a lot of people this year who had started decorating at the beginning of November. And I feel like I might need to readjust my schedule because my husband loves when our decorations are up. He would have me keep them up until April, and I want them down for sure. It's like a big deal for me to keep them up till after January 1st.
Yeah.
So, but when you start earlier in the season, I feel like I
Yeah.
might not get annoyed by it so much.
You
So I
enjoy
think
it
I might
more.
have to try that.
The anticipation of the season.
Yes,
And
exactly. Which always includes
cheesy Christmas
Are you going to say
movies.
something? Cheesy Christmas movies. And I don't know where you guys land with cheesy Christmas movies. Do you love them or do you hate them? Or are you in the middle? I'm in the middle. I'm okay
Describe a
with them.
cheesy Christmas movie. It could be Hallmark or Netflix, but how do you describe a cheesy Christmas movie?
Yeah. So we always say, so my husband loves cheesy Christmas movies. He is a Hallmark Christmas movie fanatic. And now he's found all of them on Netflix too. He knows almost all of them. Like they'll come on. He's like, ooh, this is a good one. You need to watch this one. But we call them cheesy Christmas movies when there's only one kiss and it's at the very end of the movie. Without fail, that's it. And if they have more than one kiss in it, we're like, ooh, that is Hallmark porn. More than one kiss.
Hallmark porn?
Yep, that's what we call it.
Oh my gosh.
We want to know
so funny.
on the Hallmark movie bandwagon. Are you on it or are you off of it?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Rachel, you're a little bit like me, right? You can take it or leave it.
I like them. I do, but I'm not like Bill where I'm like, I must watch all of them. Also, it should be
like
noted,
he will
Bill's
get
like,
a schedule of them.
well, yeah, and Bill's like a big guy. He's like 6'3". He's like, we don't need to say his weight, but he's a big guy. Like not like he's like a
No, he's
football player looking
6'3",
guy.
like 225 pounds. He is a truck driver. He is a
snowmobile
gruff, like he has a beard and he likes to wear his hat down low, like especially in the winter. He wears his winter cap all the time, and he's got a big teddy bear grin. But yeah, him and Hallmark don't look like they go together, but they're
no, they do not. He's not Hallmark's target audience.
No, but they found him.
They found it. Oh my gosh! All right, what are we talking about today?
So, today we are talking about boundaries. And I have a feeling that half of you are like perked up and like, ooh, I like a good boundary. I want to hear about this. I think half of you were like, shut your mouth. I hate the word boundary.
That's right. Well, and maybe there's a third as well who are like, yeah, I know I need more boundaries, but I don't really know anything about it.
That could be too. Yes, they're interested, but not really sure how to go about it.
Yes.
So maybe we are going to chat and hopefully we'll give you some information about it. So one thing I want to start with is what setting a boundary is not. Setting a boundary for yourself is not selfish. It is not self-seeking, and it is not mean. It is absolutely meant to help the relationship be at its best.
Yes.
And boundaries can come for both people. Exactly.
And that's how you know it's not selfish.
Exactly.
Because you have the good of the whole in mind.
Yes, exactly. Boundaries can be put in place physically. They can be put in place emotionally. They can be put in place spiritually. They can be put in place
verbally.
There's relationally, verbally. Yes, there's so many areas that we can put boundaries. And I think that I think some people who struggle with boundaries might be worried about is that it's a wall and you're just cutting people off or you're just shoving people away. And I do visuals a lot when I think of things, like my brain just works that way. Like you say something and I get a visual. And when I think of boundaries, I think of a very open fence because it defines very clearly what can or can't be happening, but you can still have movement over the
like
fence.
A fence with a gate that's open.
Yeah.
So like a walled in fenced-in yard, but there's a gate that opens. Is that what you mean by open fence?
Either a gate or either that or like just like maybe one board on top and one board on the bottom. So it's like very a lot of flowing in between.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Open
so not
fence.
like a brick wall, nothing like that.
Right.
Yes. So that's just what my brain goes to. And so if it's not supposed to be rigid and harsh like a wall. And so also we're having a little bit of video problems. So if Rachel, especially on Rachel's end, she kind of freezes. So if it looks like she's uninterested, she's not.
Maybe
She's
I'm not
loving what we're
interested.
talking
You don't
about.
know.
I'm going to go with she's freezing and not uninterested.
Am I frozen now?
So no, not at the moment. You're smiling. You should just keep a smile on your face. So when you freeze, you're just perpetually smiling. And if you're not watching this, you're like, okay, move on from
We
the
don't
smiles.
care. Move on.
Yeah, exactly. We can't skip. So why are boundaries important? Rachel, tell me before I keep talking, tell me why you think and you've learned that boundaries are important to have.
Well, I think when you don't have boundaries, there's can be chaos in your life and chaos in your relationship. So let's just use a very black and white example. If you say yes to everything,
Mm-hmm.
your family will fall apart. Your
Mm-hmm.
mental sanity will fall apart, right? That's
Yeah.
a very clear example of no
True.
boundaries. And so that's why boundaries are important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's, having margin in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say no to some things so that I can say
Mm-hmm.
yes to other things.
Yep.
And, or like,
Yep.
and then you want to take a more extreme example. Let's say you have someone who's just difficult in your life, someone you're going to love forever, but they're difficult. You have to put up boundaries so that the relationship doesn't tank. Because if you let someone walk on you over and over, or treat you a certain way over and over, eventually the relationship it's going to erode the relationship, and there's not going to be much left to salvage. So if you put up boundaries, it keeps the relationship salvaged, and it keeps it more healthy so that it survives.
It
and
keeps it
some
standing a
relationships
chance.
just need to be let go of. But I'm talking about relationships that are just going to stay. Your parents, your siblings, your kids, your in-laws, things like that.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, depending on what your growing up life was like, sometimes you do have to permanently walk away from a parent or a sibling.
Right.
Like that is, so we don't want to say that just because they're been in your life forever or blood, that they're always healthy enough to salvage or to keep at. And so we just want to make sure that you understand that. And that obviously is a whole different topic, but we want to just give room for that can exist. So we're talking, so we're going to talk about
we're not
the
putting shame on
today that are.
someone. We don't want to put shame on somebody who is like, but I did walk away from a relationship with my parent or, sibling or something.
Yeah.
That's between you and God. We're not judging here. We're just saying there are relationships you're not going to walk away from. And sometimes they just need boundaries.
And those are the ones we're talking about.
Yes.
And boundaries at work. That's something you can have as boundaries at work, boundaries at church, boundaries in a friend group. I mean, there's just so many places that you can have boundaries. So let's give some examples. So Rachel gave a really simple one, yes or no. It is really easy sometimes to feel like you need to say yes to everything. And saying yes to everything doesn't make you, let's say we're just talking about one person. You're saying yes to one person all the time. That doesn't make your relationship better. In fact, if anything, it's going to like eroding. I love that definition, Rachel, because what's going to happen is this person is every time you say yes, they're going to expect you to say yes more and more and more. And they're not going to have any grace for you to say no because you've always said yes. But like Rachel said, there's no possible way we can say yes to everything. And we know that logically, but then
it tilts the scales. It makes the relationship very unbalanced.
Yep. And it's almost like the other person has all the power because you don't know how to say no to them. And
I do want to say, if that's the case where you're in a relationship with someone and they quote unquote have all the power because you've said yes to everything, that's not their fault.
Right.
You might have to own some of that. But putting up a boundary will help correct the scales, tip the scales back.
Well, and what happens is when we say yes to everything and now they seem to have all the power, we're going to be resentful of them. Like eventually we're going to not want to answer the phone when they call, or we're going to roll our eyes at their texts, and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, they always need everything from us. But Rachel's right. Have you actually ever said no? Because if you haven't said no, why would they not keep asking? I mean, that's just common sense that you're going to keep going to the source that keeps saying yes to you.
Well, and I'm the kind of person who will ask people very much assuming they'll say no. And so if I keep asking you and you keep saying yes, I'm like, then it must work for you. And so it's like your job to put a boundary up, not around me, but around your life, to tell me when it doesn't work for you.
Yeah. So this is a simple boundary, but I feel like sometimes we have to start at the simplest to ever be able to get our way into the bigger ones. Years and years ago, when I was I don't even think I had kids yet. So I was a newlywed, and I was often asked by the church we were going to like bring bars or bring cookies or bring any kind of baked good to all sorts of church functions. And I hate baking. I love to cook. I hate baking. So having to bake on a timeline for people I didn't know and getting it there and dropping it, all of that felt terrible to me. Like that just was like the worst thing ever. And I did it a few times.
There's a
And
lot
I
of things you could do that would be life-giving. That's not one of them.
Exactly, exactly. And I remember talking to God about it because I was like, I feel selfish. I feel so bad that I don't want to do this. And what he said so clearly to me, he's like, I didn't gift you to do that. That's not
That's
what
right.
you're supposed to be saying yes to.
That's right.
That's the place you say no, because I have all sorts of other things that you're supposed to be saying yes to. But when you fill up your time
Right.
with the thing that I didn't design you to do, can you hear my dogs? Someone
No,
let them downstairs. Okay,
I
good.
can't
Well,
hear
you'll
him.
see them running around. Okay. Um, God has designed all of us for very different things. And if we fill up our time and energy with the thing he did not design us to, we're never going to be able to do the thing that actually breathes life into us and that we're actually really good at. So I started saying no. And I have literally not brought a baked good to a function ever since. And I feel very okay with that. I don't feel bad because they have a whole list of people to ask. And I volunteer and give in a whole lot of other ways that
Right.
I'm actually good at. And so that is just a simple case. But Rachel, do you have a simple one that you can think of that
Yeah.
you've?
Well, mine is church too. And, like I'm good with kids. I have a lot of kids. I can wrangle a lot of kids, but I don't help in children's ministry because I
Same.
have skills that other people in my church, very few people have. And if I'm in children's ministry, not only can I not do those gifts, but then it won't get done. And it's like, so
Yep.
I document, I make videos, I make reels for my church. I'm on the greeting team. I'm very good at connecting people. And it's like, I can't do all of those things. And there are people who all they want to do is church or kids once a month. And it's
hang out
like,
with the kids. Yeah.
yeah, they're like, that's not hard for me. And that's all they want to do. They don't want to be doing all the little things that I'm happy to do. I can't do them all. And so I have to say no to that. And I feel a little guilty. I did for a lot of years because I have kids. And so I was using it. But then I was like, really like you, like I have so many other things that I would have to say no to be in the kids ministry. And those are things
Yeah.
that other people in my church don't do, or
gifted
very
for.
few people do.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's like, it's not, well, I'm just selfish and I don't want to be in kids. It's like, no, I have things I'm doing and I can't do them all. And so putting up that boundary. And if someone did ask me once to do it, like, can you do it once a month? And somehow I said yes. Like, I didn't really mean to. It was almost like the conversation didn't make sense. And before I knew what I was saying, yes. And then I went back to her and I was like, you know what? I'm sorry. This is not where I need to be serving, because something else I'm really good at is working with youth. And we have a youth pastor. And when he's unavailable, I was the only one who could step in. We go to a really small church. And I was like, and then he kept asking me on the same time I was supposed to be in kids. And I'm like, I need to be available to do that because I'm the only one who steps in with these rowdy bunch of middle schoolers. And so, yeah, I was like, I just had to recognize where am I supposed to say yes? But that means also there's some places I'm supposed to say no.
Exactly. Obviously, boundaries around our home. So another example for myself is, so we live in a neighborhood full of boys, my boys' age. So we moved here 10 years ago. So they have grown up in this neighborhood with all these boys who are now in middle school and high school. And and I love having kids at my house. That is something Bill and I have always wanted, is a space for the people to bring kids. So my kids bring kids over all the time. But the ones who like actually live in the neighborhood, they could definitely overwhelm me very quickly if because they're right here all the time. And there's 3 of our yards that we live like on a curve, and there's 3 of our yards that are very close together. So if they're in one yard, they're kind of in all 3 yards. And we have a front porch that they love to hang out on, which means they end up in my house and they end up eating my food and things like that. And I learned from a long time ago. So one of the things about setting boundaries, it's the way we can figure out how to do this, is you have to figure out, yourself, what in this situation is going to make me lose it. What in the situation is going to make me
What's going to be the
feel
last straw?
exactly what's going to make me fall apart and be terrible at this. And so I knew right away that if I didn't have the right to tell all the neighbor kids who I love very much, you guys need to leave. You need to go home right now. I need my house to have no kids here, that would put me under. And so that's just what I do. I say to them, okay, guys, everyone needs to sleep. Now, obviously, as they've gotten older, they like roam the neighborhood and it's not as much of a big deal. But when they were younger and I felt more responsible for them, I had to have the ability to tell them that they needed to go home. Thankfully, the moms and I get along really well, and we all agreed. I kind of started that conversation, just so you guys know, if I ever send your kids home, it's not because I'm mad at them. I just need no kids at my house. And they all were like, that's beautiful. Well, let's all do that. Like,
yeah.
And we all agreed that that I started this conversation. Like, if they're fighting with my kids, I'm going to send them home. Or if my kids are fighting with them, I'm going to send your kids home. Like, I'm going to kind of treat everyone the same when they're at my house because it's my house. And they were like, that's a good idea. We will do the same. And I needed to have that. And it has never been overwhelming. For 10 years. We've had all these kids. And, but if I hadn't started that from the beginning, I would have kind of imploded and nobody would even want to be at my house because I
Yeah.
probably
And
would have
it's
lost it on them
more painful to implement a boundary after
later.
later. I mean, it's still important to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's harder when people have
Yes.
the expectation of, well, this is how we've always done it. And
Mm-hmm.
now
Yeah,
I don't like that you're changing things on me,
exactly. Yeah.
but it's still
Now,
important to do it. Like
it
when you
is. And
know
it's
that you need to. Yeah.
and it's never too late. Because and how do you know where you need to set a boundary? So I would say, you need to set a boundary when it makes you tighten your chest at the thought
Mhm.
of whatever, when it makes you feel overwhelmed, when it makes you feel
Mhm.
like you're going to fall apart, when it makes you feel
Or
like you
like
want to
you'd
hide
rather
under a
not,
rock.
or rather not be with those people.
Exactly. There's anything like that is like I know you all are thinking and you all have your own word that you're like, oh, this is how I feel when
Mhm.
that happens. That is where you have to set a boundary. And it's the best if you can, like I said, look ahead at a situation and know what you need. So for like, if you're going to go hang out with friends and you're like, I know that I need to leave at 8 o'clock, but they're going to
Mhm.
all make me feel like I need to stay till midnight, but I know I need
Yeah.
to leave because I need to get to bed early or I have things to
Mhm.
do. I have to get up in the morning. One of the best things you could do is text that group of friends and say,
Yep.
hey, I'm coming, but I have to leave at 8 and I need you not to ask me to stay
Yes.
later. Because now
Mhm.
you've just put it out there and now the conversation doesn't have to happen anymore. And the
Mhm.
reality is that if these people love you, they're going to honor that and they're not going to bug you. But you know how it is once you're hanging out
Right.
and you're having fun, it's much easier to be like, no, stay, don't leave or whatever. And so, um, another way that it's really important to put up boundaries is with your kids. Excuse me. It is very easy as moms to feel like we need to do everything for our kids.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that helped me not feel guilty about putting boundaries around my kids was when they were younger, realizing that if I did everything for them, I was not teaching them how to be an adult. And our goal, really,
Well,
we want to teach them to be a good self-sustaining adults, right?
you'd be teaching them to be a lazy adult because they'll
A lazy
eventually
adult.
become an adult, but they won't be a useful one.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. And if there is not, if a spoiled lazy kid is hard, a spoiled lazy adult is worse, and nobody
Mhm.
wants to be around that. And I'm like, I want to teach them to, I'm assuming my kids want to get married. I want to teach them how to be wives and how to be husbands, and I want to teach them how to be a parent and how to engage, and so if I did everything for them, they would grow up and become, on their own and be like, I don't even know how to do a load of laundry. I don't know how to make
Mhm.
myself a meal. I don't know how to do anything like that. And I think it's easy to feel like we're loving our kids well when we do everything for them. But I want to encourage you to think that that might be, we're maybe not loving them well because
Right.
we're setting them up kind of for failure.
Mhm.
And so, or taking care of yourself by like going away for a girls' weekend, or you and your spouse going on a date, or you going, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of your kids. And again, it's easy to feel like if I leave my kids, they're going to be sad. Well, yeah, they might be sad, but that's part of life, is learning
Right.
how to deal with being sad, and it can't have everything be about them.
Mhm.
And so something that I don't have to do this anymore, but when my kids were younger, if Bill and I were going to go away for a weekend or something and they were sad about it, what I would say to them, I would say, I'm sorry you're going to miss me, but let me ask you this: when you get to go away for a weekend to your cousin's house or to your grandparents' house or a friend's house, do you get excited about that? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, and how do you feel if I'm excited for you? And they're like, well, that feels good. I'm like, and how do you feel if I cry and pout and wish you wouldn't go? They're like, oh yeah, that would make it much harder
Mhm.
to go have fun. And so that's the way I put boundaries around myself with my kids starting at a young age, is talking them through, not because I owe them an explanation, so to speak, but because I
Right.
care about them and I want
Right.
them to understand my reasoning. And it has nothing to do with not loving them. It's because I need to take care of myself.
Mhm.
Obviously, we could go spend hours talking about putting up boundaries around our kids, but I
We could.
I think the key here is to recognize that saying no to your kids is actually loving them really well.
Yeah.
Teaching them why life isn't all about them is loving them really well.
Mhm.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily about kids, but I was just thinking about boundaries like in my marriage and how
Mm-hmm.
Joey's one of those guys when it's time to go, he's like, okay, I'll jump in the shower. And I'm like, okay,
As you've gotten 8 kids ready to get out of the house.
exactly. And so, we've had to have a lot of conversations, and I have recognized in the last few years how much what things make me feel very anxious. And when I'm
Mm-hmm.
anxious, I start losing it at people in my family.
Yep.
And nobody likes when mom's losing it at them. And
No.
it's not anybody's fault that I'm anxious. And so I'm like, what boundaries can I
Mm-hmm.
put up around my day or my timeline
Mm-hmm.
to not create this level of anxiety that is going to not benefit anybody?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like adding extra time into my schedule. I don't like to be late, so we're always early.
Mm-hmm.
I being on time is late to me, and that causes anxiety in me, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so telling my husband, listen, I need you to be ready 20 minutes before we're going to leave, because then I actually want you to help me get everyone out the door. I actually want you to help me like where we're going. But if I don't say that, then I'm just really frustrated when he doesn't do it, because he doesn't think like me and he's just thinking about getting himself ready. And it's like, okay, but these are all the things we have to do to get us out the door. So this is how much time I need from you, and saying that in advance, and not, we've learned this the hard way, unfortunately, by not, but it's just having some boundaries around my timeline, and boundaries around my expectations, and boundaries around, if you struggle with anxiousness, it's being like, anxiety doesn't get to rule me here. What changes can I make, and what boundaries can I put up? Or even when we're on our way out the door, my kids, inevitably someone wants to tell me about Pokemon and how their friend has this many and he has this many and this one has this many health. And I'm like, hey, I love you. And I really, quote unquote, really can't wait to hear what you have to say, end quote. But not right now. After everyone has gotten their water bottles and their shoes on and they are buckled in the car and I am driving out, then you may talk
then
to
I
me.
can listen.
I will turn to you and say, because otherwise I feel like I'm going to lose my mind, because people aren't listening. No one has their water bottles. No one has, their snack, and then they're going to be hungry, and I'm not going to stop and get them. That's a boundary. I'm not going to stop and get a snack. If I told you to get a snack, you bring a snack, or you don't get a snack. And, but I also want my kids to not be hungry. So, and it's like, that's a boundary. When we're getting out the door, people cannot talk to me.
This is not the time to have a conversation.
And my husband will be like, do you think I should switch jobs? And I'm like, on the way out the door, are you serious? I wonder where they get it from.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
This is not the right time.
No.
Just simple boundaries. And you don't have to say to somebody, I am putting up a boundary. Because then it makes it feel like they've done something wrong. And my kids or my husband, they have not done something wrong, because I can't handle what they're putting out there. Doesn't mean they've done something wrong. It means I'm recognizing my limits, and I need to put out into our family space or into the world. I need to put out what those limits are for everybody's benefit. And so sometimes people have done something wrong and you need to put up a boundary. But a lot of times boundaries are not people doing anything wrong.
It's just getting through the day.
It's just figuring out what you need, what's best. And so, someone will be like, hey, are you around tomorrow? Can I stop by at this time? I'm like, yeah, but I only have 45 minutes. No one didn't. But friend, what a lovely thing to ask if they could stop by and say hi. They have done nothing wrong. But if I don't say I only have 45 minutes and they show up and stay 2 hours, I'm going to be mad at them. And it's really my own fault, because I didn't tell them.
They didn't do anything wrong.
Right. Or if I say, hey, I have a book I'm writing and could you read it? And I need it read in 6 weeks. If you can't commit to that, that is fine. But then this is what I'm asking.
You need.
That is so loving. A friend of mine once said to me, oh my gosh, that's so loving. I would never have considered putting a deadline on it. And I'm like, well, that way people know exactly what I'm asking.
What you're expecting.
I'm like, it'll probably take you 10 hours, like I'm giving them upfront all the information. That's putting up a boundary. No one has done anything wrong. It's just a way of me loving and serving those around me. But if I'm like, can you read this book? And people are like, yeah, sure. And like 3 months later, I'm like, you're 2 months over the deadline. And they're like, what deadline? I'm like, the one I had in my head.
Exactly.
It's not loving. And Melissa and I were talking before we hit record about so many examples of Jesus setting boundaries in the Bible. Or did you have more examples, or did you want to move on? Sorry.
I have lots of examples that I can give, but we can definitely go in and out of them. So you can share a few things.
Well, I think a lot of times we don't talk about Jesus having examples, or Jesus having boundaries. I don't know that people even think about it. I said it to a friend recently, like, oh, here's an example of Jesus having boundaries. And she was like, I've never even considered that he did. Like, we're not.
He had a lot.
He had a lot. Well, and if you're not looking for boundaries, you oftentimes don't see them. And then if you're a person who feels guilty about putting boundaries up, you don't even realize how simple boundaries can be and how it doesn't have to be this big thing. So do you want to give some examples of Jesus?
Yeah. Let me, okay. So he would often take time away from everybody. So he would ask people basically to leave him alone, because he needed to go off and spend time with God alone. So when you need time alone, whatever that means, if there's times that I want to go on a walk just by myself, and my youngest loves to go on walks with me, and I let him a lot of times, but there's times where I'm like, honey, today I just need to go be by myself. And he's like, okay, that's fine. So he would also separate himself regulars from people with his small group of, his closest friends. Again, girls' weekends, time with your sister or your mom or whoever it is that fills you up. It's okay to say, this is going to be a small group of people I'm going to spend time with. That
kind of stuff does hurt people's feelings sometimes, but knowing that if we're with 20 people every time we celebrate or do anything, you're not really getting filled up with 20 people. There's
No.
a time and a place for that, but
Mhm.
not all the time.
Yep, exactly. Jesus was really proactive and consistently investing in his time with God, which gave him energy and focus. And
I think it's the only way he didn't burn out and he did his ministry
mhm,
well was
I
that
agree.
consistent time with God
Yep.
alone.
And away from people
Right.
because you can love people so well for only so long.
Well,
Um,
and it's important to note that Jesus was human, but also
mhm,
God. And if
yeah.
he needed time away from God, or not from God,
Away
time
from
away from
people.
people and with God, and he needed time in prayer,
Mhm.
like how much
How
more
much
does that
more?
mean we need it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. He often did not do what people wanted or expected him to do. He did not go by other people's expectations. He
Right.
knew what his calling was. He knew who he was supposed to be. He knew his mission. And that was his focus. It wasn't on, well, I want to please everybody. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is a huge reason why we as women, especially, don't put up boundaries is our fear of making people upset. We don't want to hurt,
Right.
we don't want to make people mad or hurt people.
Or let
But
them
if we're going to,
down by saying
yeah,
no. I'm
yep.
certain
But
Jesus wouldn't have signed up to do baked goods.
I'm sure he would not have. He didn't even own a kitchen,
But even if he did.
even if he did. Yes. One of the examples is that food was often on his mind. And what makes me laugh about that is I think we're all like, food is on our mind, and maybe we need some boundaries around that
Right,
sometimes.
right. Some of us need boundaries around food.
But what that means is that he taking care of himself was important. It was on his mind. He was,
Yeah.
he paid attention to what his body needed and what other people when other people needed to eat, he would make sure, okay, let's stop and you're gonna eat.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and there were lots of naps in the Bible. Lots of naps,
yes.
Old Testament and New Testament. Jesus
Who
took care of
wants
himself eating and napping.
and napping? I mean, my word, how could we not want to be like this man?
Exactly.
He did not give in to the manipulations of religious leaders. You guys, I don't, if you don't know this, Jesus made the religious people mad. Like he did
Mad is
not
right.
come and fall into place of what they had created as
No.
their agenda. And so it's easy to think, well, this person is so smart or they're, in a position of authority or this, that doesn't mean that you automatically have to agree and
Right.
follow suit. Like you can
It
have
doesn't
your
make them your authority.
exactly. And he called out inappropriate behavior. Like that is something that I think is so important to remember is that um, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's with your kids, whether it's with your best friend, if someone is treating you hurtfully or doing something, I mean, inappropriate could have a whole lot of, connotations to it, what that means.
Right.
But it is absolutely okay to say that when you say that to me, that really hurts me. That's putting up
Mm-hmm.
a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we are afraid the boundaries are not biblical, I hope that list just helped you see that. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
just a small list. You could go and spend a lot
Yeah.
more time looking at other things. And you could go to the Old Testament. And I'm sure a lot of the prophets had boundaries and all, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there just had to be, that's just how we have, in order to be healthy, we have to have them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a boundary that, oh shoot, I just had one in my head and I blanked. Rachel, do you have anything to say while my brain catches up?
Well, I think I mentioned like when a friend's gonna come over or whatever, and like you were talking about 8 p.m., the saying in advance, if that
Yes.
feels really scary to you, like,
Hmm.
oh, I have to go and I have to leave at 8 p.m., like if that makes you nervous,
Hmm.
like those kinds of things don't make Melissa and I nervous. We're just don't
Hmm.
have that personality to
Hmm.
be nervous to leave at 8 when we say we need to leave at 8, but
Yeah.
do it in advance.
Yep.
Set the boundary up in advance. So one time our mom was coming over to our house and her and her friend were walking. She was here in Arizona staying at her condo. It's 2 miles away. They were going to walk here and grab our vehicle. My husband had literally just gotten home from being gone for a week and we were like just seeing him. And our mom had wanted us to me to hang out at some point with this friend. And I wanted that.
Hmm.
But I said, yes, please come over and get the van or the car. But I absolutely cannot spend any time with you.
Hmm.
Joey has just gotten home. The kids, it's chaos.
Yeah.
Like this is not the right time.
Yeah.
And she was like, can I show her your house? We had just moved in and renovated. I was like, yeah, absolutely. But I'm not going to give the tour.
Hmm.
And then you can even go outside. We have like grapefruit trees. I was like, you can even go outside. You know how to use my juicer. You can make mimosas.
Hmm.
I'm just not going to be hanging
Gonna
out
be a
with
part
you.
of it. Yep.
I don't even care if you're here. I just not going to hang out with you. And she
Hmm.
was like, okay, no problem. And like,
Hmm.
but if she had shown up
Hmm.
unexpectedly, it's a lot harder to me to be like, we can't hang out right now.
Yeah. It feels
It's
hurtful.
so much
Hmm.
easier in advance.
Yep.
And so Melissa was saying, think forward. What is it
Yep.
going to be like when you
Hmm.
need to do something?
Hmm.
And then think, what do I need to do to make it easier for me?
Yep. So with that, I know we don't have a lot of time, but talking about expectations has been a game changer for my marriage. So Bill used to be over the road. He would come home every weekend and we would die apart. Like we missed each other so much. And then we get together and all we did was fight. So we started talking about our expectation for the weekend, because what we were realizing is that a lot of times, he had just driven 3 or 4,000 miles that week. He didn't want to go anywhere. And I was like, I just stayed home all week with kids.
Right.
I just want to go do something.
Mhm.
So we started talking about, okay, how was your week? What do you need from this weekend? How was my week? What do I need? Whose need is greater? Or
Mhm.
can we even them out? Can we do some of both? And
Mhm.
suddenly we knew what to expect for the weekend, and
Mhm.
we stopped fighting. I mean, obviously we still
And
fought, but not at
both
all the way
needs were
we
getting
had.
met.
Yes,
Everyone
exactly.
felt seen. The
Mhm.
relationship was better. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a million examples and a million ways that we could, I mean, we just touched on the surface of
Right.
boundaries. There's a lot deeper boundaries that can be set with people.
Mhm.
Like I know that people who have really maybe unhealthy relationships with a parent or a spouse, even, or a friend. Like, okay, that's going to go a whole lot there.
Right.
It's basically the same concept, but it's going to take a whole lot more
Right.
to do it. So maybe we'll do another episode of like deeper boundaries at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Because I think that we've covered a lot today. And I hope that what you take away from this is that boundaries are good. They're
Mhm.
not negative and they are not selfish. They are
Healthy,
absolutely healthy and life-giving
and biblical.
and biblical.
Do we
Be
have a
like
challenge
Jesus.
before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I want you guys to spend time thinking about, if you start trying to put boundaries up in every single minute of your day, you're going to go crazy. Just like anything, we need to start with like one or two things. So think of like one area that you know that overdoes you on the regular. And if you were just to set some boundaries around it, that it would most likely get a lot better and a lot easier to handle. So think of that and then do it. And if
Yeah.
if you're like, okay, I have the situation, I know what I need to do, but I don't actually know how to approach it. Those are kind of things Rachel and I love talking about. And not that we're experts, but we have spent a lot of years practicing putting up boundaries in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. We had to have, I mean, we talked about this before, between her
Yep.
and I, we had to have boundaries in
Yep.
a whole lot of ways. Some were
Yep.
really harsh for a while. And then some are just like, hey, you looked weird at me. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I need
Yeah,
to be able to say that,
exactly.
or she needs to be able to say that. So you can definitely message us at, we can go to our website. You can see messnonetheless.com. You can find us on Facebook and
Instagram.
Instagram at a mess nonetheless. You can message us there,
Yeah,
or
we'd
you can
love
email
to
us.
hear from you.
Or you can email us at a mess nonetheless at gmail.com. And we've got your back and we're praying for you, because this can be a game changer in how our day functions when we start putting boundaries up.
Absolutely.
All
All
right.
right.
You guys have a great week. We'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.